Hello friends, welcome back to my show. What do viruses really look like? Most of us think that they are evil looking creatures. But do they really look like the pictures that we see in the print and electronic media? Let's find out in this video. To understand why viruses are shown the way they are depicted in all these pictures in the print and electronic media, take a look at the picture on the screen right now. Can you identify the city? Well, it could be Singapore, Dubai, even Manhattan, or any other busy metropolis. But actually, it is not a city center at all. If I now show you the next photograph, you'll easily associate that with a motherboard. You'll be surprised that the picture on the right is actually a close-up view zoomed into the motherboard itself with the components in place. It is easy to visualize, to imagine, and to understand the picture on the left as referring to a motherboard. But that on the right does not click in our mind as a motherboard at all. What you are seeing on the screen now is a schematic diagram or a circuitry of a motherboard. And it shows all the interfaces between the various components on the motherboard. The engineers actually work with this diagram and not with the two pictures shown in the earlier slide. The same applies to all pictorial representations, and we'll see another example of that. The picture on the right is actually a few lines drawn on a terrain photograph of a particular place. It's very difficult to know what it actually represents. It may be highways, or it could be some form of transportation which is represented here. But the moment I show you this picture, you will not hesitate to call it the map of the London Underground or the London Tube. The picture on the right is actually the same map superimposed on the terrain in the actual sense. It is not straight lines. This is how the lines of the tube run across London. But in order to get around in the city, the one on the left is that which is most useful. It helps us to get around. That is a pictorial representation of the London terrain. Now the picture that you see on the screen is that of the coronavirus as it looks like under a scanning electron microscope. This picture is from the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It is shown in black and white and not color. And the reason for that is that when we are using a scanning electron microscope, there is no color vision in that. Color is a property of the visible spectrum of light. And the size of the virus is much smaller than the wavelength of visible light. That's why they use electrons to be bounced off the virus in order to understand what lies within. So essentially, when we fail to apply the optical microscope to a virus, we use other synthetic means to measure sizes which are of the range of 9 to 12 nanometers, while the wavelength of light can only go as far as 400 to 700 nanometers. Coronaviruses are almost 500 to 1,000 times smaller than visible bacteria. And when I say visible, it is an object visible through the optical microscope. So in reality, this is a reconstructed image with the help of an electron bouncing off a coronavirus. In this particular picture, what we see is a coronavirus that has been artificially filled with color, just like we fill colors in a mandala graphic. It is not reality, but the color has been applied to distinguish and highlight various parts. So we must understand that this is not the real thing. It is a reconstructed image with artificial color added to provide the effects that we need to highlight and distinguish various constituent parts. So where do these images of viruses we see in books and in the electronic media come from? Many of them are actually downloaded from the website of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is a US government organization. Now what you see over here are actually explained in their subtitles. They are graphical representations, three-dimensional graphical representations of a particular virus. You must understand that these are not photographs. The person you're looking at on the screen is Dr. David Goodsell. He is a doctor, a researcher, and an artist. And he turns these deadly viruses into beautiful artwork. He creates all the artwork which is used by various journals and institutions. And what he says is that I want to somehow inform the scientists and armchair scientists what the state of knowledge is now and hopefully give them an intuitive sense of how these things really look or may look. What he's actually doing is transform the photograph of a motherboard into a schematic diagram with which we can explain how the virus works and what can be done about it. And that holds true for all these computer generated models, which once again you should not confuse with reality. The atomic structure, the one that you see on the left, is the atomic structure of water. This is a protein. And here we have an imaginary fictional figure called Superman. Quite frankly, they are all ideas that have been given a graphical shape. They just stir up our imagination and give us a handle to deal with abstract ideas. Just as schematics that we saw earlier. They provide the engineer a handle on how to work with the electronics inside the components which are mounted on the PCB. Thanks to researchers and artist doctors like Dr. Goodsell, here is a picture of a coronavirus. Such a beautiful artwork that it brings to life and brings into our imagination how it works. All of you might be familiar with terms like spike glycoproteins and how the vaccines are being prepared from that. But very frankly, these are just ideas and imaginations. As in the London map, the picture is as real as Batman or Superman, and remember, map is not the territory. In our current vocabulary of myths, we tend to equate viruses with crazy robot killers, like Cylon from Battlestar Galactica or Arnold Schwarzenegger playing the role of Terminator. We see so many other synthetic or created characters on Netflix almost every day. Our visual representations of viruses are just as real as Cylon and Terminator. Remember, viruses are created fully formed. There is no baby virus which grows into an adult virus. And they rely on the host materials and environment to build and power themselves. We have seen that in the first video. The fictional forms that are illustrated here only exist in our mind. So whether it's a Cylon or a Terminator or the structure represented by artist doctors like Dr. Goodsell are just that. They help us to stir up our imagination and work with it like a schematic diagram. Coming up in the next video, that is part 3, we shall examine whether viruses can cause the deadly disease attributed to them. What have we learned from our past experiences? And I can assure you that the next video is going to be very provocative and enlightening at the same time. I shall now summarize the main points of this video. Viruses cannot be seen in the conventional sense, and they are not colored. Just remember that. Those beautiful pictures are actually functional diagrams. They are schematic representations only and not the reality. And we also saw that these artistic images are as real as Batman, Silos, or Terminator. So don't deceive yourself. So friends, thank you very much for your attention, and we shall meet once again in the video that will follow. Until then, bye bye and thank you very much.